Okay, so good evening. The Sikha we're learning tonight is from Chelek, volume 17, and it's a Sikha on Erev Pesach, which is on the project to put the Sikha schedule. It's going to be learned, I think, either next week or the week after. So they have not yet published the materials for it, but hopefully we could learn it together. Okay, so the Rabbi discusses some of the intricacies, or if you will, the mechanics of the halacha, specifically related to this year when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos. So there is a custom, which we're all familiar with, recorded in chapter Tov Ayin, that's 470 of Shulchan Aruch, that the firstborns fast on Erev Pesach. Why do the firstborns fast on Erev Pesach? Because they experienced a great miracle, namely that they were saved from Makas B'chayros. They were saved from the plague of the firstborn dying, and in commemoration of that, they fast. By the way, there's another thing that we do in commemoration of the firstborns being saved from that plague, which is not a custom, it's actually a biblical commandment, and that is the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, to redeem the firstborn children, which is explicitly said in the Torah that is because Hashem spared them, passed over them at the plague of Makas B'chayros. Now, the Rebbe brings later on in the Sikha from the Birkei Yosef. Birkei Yosef is the Chidah. Chaim Yosef David al-Zulai, who wrote many Sforim, and the Chidah writes that really the fast of the firstborn should have been on the first day of Yom Pesach. The first night of Pesach is when the plague of the firstborns transpired, so that's the day that they were saved. But because of course we can't fast on Yom Tov, so it was so it's pushed back to be done the day before Yom Tov. Okay, resumed recording. So we fast. The firstborns are fasting to commemorate the special miracle that they had, that they were saved from the plague of the firstborn, and ideally, in theory, as Ariel likes to say, in theory, the fast should have been on the first day of Pesach. Of course, fasting on the first day of Pesach is not an option, so it's pushed back to the day preceding Pesach. Now, why is fasting connected to commemorating this? So there's many different, like, since when do we fast to commemorate the miracle? So there's different explanations given. One of the explanations given is just fasting doesn't just mean to not eat. It means to be engaged in fasting, in prayer, in extra supplications. Which, if you recall, on Sunday, we actually mentioned, if I recall correctly, was in the name of the Magen Avram. One of the reasons why we, on such a year, push the fast back to Thursday and not to Friday is because on a day of a fast, we have extra long davening and slichas and all of that stuff. And we don't want, ideally, to put that on Friday. We want people to have time to prepare for Shabbos. Okay. Now, so in Shulchan Aruch, the rule is brought down, and you see here the first source this is from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Sif 7 of that chapter. When the day before Pesach falls on a Friday, the firstborn should fast on that day. So when it's on Friday, we don't say, oh, we don't fast on Friday, push it back. If the day before Pesach falls on a Friday, as it did 2 years ago, for example, then we fast on that day. However, when the day before Pesach falls on Shabbos, like it does this year, then the fast is moved forward to the preceding Thursday. And the idea is that if you're anyway moving it, so then move it back to Thursday. We're not so cool about making a fast on Friday. If the fast happens to fall on Friday, we keep it there. But if we're going to be moving it anyway, so then we move it back all the way to Thursday. Why don't we like making fasts on Friday? So the way the Alter Rebbe gives the reason is, and this is from chapter from Siman Reish Mem Tes 249. As an initial preference, Friday should not be designated as a fast day unless one will partake of something before, except in Shabbos, so that he will not enter Shabbos while he is distressed. An exceedingly delicate person is exempt from the above requirements for were he to eat even a little during the day, he will not eat with appetite at night. So without getting into all the details, the idea is that we don't want to make it fast on Friday because we don't want to. You have to mute if you're here and you're on the Zoom. You have to mute the audio. Okay, so we don't want somebody to come into Shabbos in a state of starvation or distress. So that's why we don't make fast on Friday. Okay, now the Alter Rebbe continues, and here I just put the English, but this is the continuation of this Sif Yud Beis 12 of chapter 249. To what does the above apply? When do we say that we don't make a fast on Friday? To a fast designated by a private individual that does not have a fixed time, and therefore that fast could be observed on another day. If, however, the fixed time for the fast falls on Friday, e.g., when fasting in commemoration of the death of a righteous man, as will be explained in section 580, which nowadays is not the common practice, but okay. Or similarly, when fast the day before the Chodesh, so then he doesn't have to postpone that fast to another day if that date happens to fall on Friday. Right? In other words, if a person stamazoi wants to fast because whatever, let's say as part of his teshuva process, again nowadays it's not recommended, it's not encouraged, but at least in theory there's the concept of fasting for teshuva. So we tell you don't fast on Friday. Choose any other day to fast. But this is a fixed reason why you want to fast today. You have the custom to fast the day before Shledesh. You have the custom to fast on the yard site of a tzaddik, and that day happens to fall on a Friday, so then you can fast on Friday. Although all of these fasts that are held on Friday are not obligatory at all, there is no need to postpone them as an expression of respect for Shabbos. The rationale is that the prohibition not to enter Shabbos while the stress is mild and is taken into consideration only insofar as to not to designate Friday as a fast as an initial preference when it is possible to designate the fast on another day. When by contrast, one does not have the option of designating the fast on another day, this is not sufficient grounds for him to cancel the fast entirely. So basically, there is a value in not fasting on Friday so as not to go into Shabbos while distressed, but that value is not an all-encompassing, overarching value. It has some value, and therefore we take it into consideration together with all the other values. If one of the other values is that there's a specific value to fast today specifically, then we're going to allow you to fast even if it's Friday. If the value is just to fast, so then, okay, ideally push the fast off to a different day. Okay. Okay, so there is on this Shulchan Aruch there is a Kuntres Achron. Kuntres Achron is where the Alter Rebbe sort of elaborates to substantiate the ruling that he gave in the actual Shulchan Aruch. And here in English he gives a synopsis of the Kuntres Achron, which we're going to read, even though it's not all of it is relevant, but some of it is going to be relevant to the discussion of the Sikha. So I feel it would be nice to learn this Kuntres Achron together anyway. Okay, so in his Kuntres Achron in notes 5, the Alter Rebbe elaborates in support of his ruling in the main text. Initially, he explains that the source for his ruling, which is the Pri Chodosh, cites a Talmudic passage from Pesachim, which relates that the sage, Mar, the son of Ravina, would fast the entire year, including Friday, except for 3 days, Shavuos, Purim, and Yom Kippur. That the Alter Rebbe explains is a debatable source for this ruling, since Mar, the son of Ravina, would fast on Shabbos as well. So the Pri Chodosh says that if you have a specific reason to fast on Friday, you're allowed to fast on Friday, which is what we saw the Alter Rebbe quoting in the actual Shulchan Aruch. What's the basis for this? Because we find that Mar Bar Zinna used to fast all year round, with the exception of Purim, Shavuos, and Erev Yom Kippur. He fasted every day. He would eat at night and fast during the day. So the Alter Rebbe says, well, that's not really conclusive evidence because Mar Bar Zinna fasted on Shabbos also. So clearly, however we're going to justify that, that's not really the rule for everyone. But the Alter Rebbe continues, nevertheless, Eruvin 40b states that the students of Rav's house of study would fast on Fridays. Tosfos interprets this as referring to an optional fast, and thus it is apparent that such a fast may be observed on Friday. Okay, so bottom line is we do have some precedent from Talmudic, from the Talmud that it's okay to fast on Friday, and that's basically the precedent for the basis for the Alter Rebbe's ruling that fasting on Friday is not desirable, but it's tolerable when there are other considerations. Nevertheless, okay, Nathan?
Yeah.
Nevertheless, a question can be raised, for there are several instances where fasts are not observed on Friday, so as not to enter Shabbos amidst discomfort. For example, if Purim is celebrated on Saturday night and Sunday, then the fast of Esther is not observed on Friday as an act of respect for Shabbos. So what's the fast of Esther? So the fast of Esther is an unusual year without Shabbos getting in the way. Purim is on the 14th of 14th of Adar, which is the day after the Jews went to war against their enemies. The 13th was the day that they actually went to war, and they fasted in order to they prayed and fasted to be victorious in the war. So as the Torah says, and I wonder if I quoted this later in the social, let me just check. The Torah says that that's why we fast on the day that they fasted to commemorate that. So what happens when Purim falls on Sunday? So you can't fast on Shabbos. So you fast on Thursday. You could fast on Friday, but we don't. We push back Tanis Esther to the Thursday. Because since it is forbidden to fast on the date that the fast is usually observed for this Shabbos, fast is scheduled for Thursday instead of Friday. The same question can be asked regarding. So, okay, let's get the next few lines. Hold on. Right. So that would seem to be a challenge to the Alter Rebbe's ruling. The Alter Rebbe rules that you may fast on Fridays. There's a reason to, right? And we have the precedent, whether the precedent is from Rabbi Ravina or from the students of Rav, whatever the Talmudic precedent is. But if that's the case, what's up with Tanis Esther? Why, when Purim falls on Shabbos, are we pushing back Tanis Esther to Thursday and not to Friday? So the Alter Rebbe explains, the resolution the Alter Rebbe explains, that when it is possible to hold the fast on another day, it should not be scheduled for Friday. Nevertheless, the prohibition against entering Shabbos while fast is mild in nature and can be superseded when rescheduling the fast is not possible. He explains that the students of Rav's house of study had accepted the practice of fasting the entire week, and hence it is considered as if they could not reschedule the fast, and hence were permitted to fast on Friday. And then he goes into the Anshe, right? So basically, the Alter Rebbe says that indeed the cases of the Talmud, which from where we see precedent for fasting on Friday, were in cases where there was, quote, no other option. Another, let's rephrase that. That was in cases where the only other option would be to not fast, because you got to fast the whole week. So you can't say fast Thursday instead of Friday. I'm fasting Thursday anyway. Thursday can't be instead of Friday, right? But in the case of Tanis Esther, or for that matter, in the case of Tanis Bechiris that we're talking about now, the fast of the first ones, you can push it back to Friday, but you can also push it back to Thursday instead of Friday. So let's push it back. So now the question is, so as we say, the question is, what happens if somebody doesn't fast on Thursday? And we have, again, we're talking about two scenarios here. We're talking about Tanis Esther, which falls back to Thursday, and what's relevant now next week, where the fast of the first one comes back to Thursday. What happened if somebody didn't fast on Thursday? Let's say because he forgot. He woke up, he had a coffee, he forgot. So then what? Now, do you have to fast on Friday or not? Now, essentially, you could phrase this question. In other words, what's really at the heart of this question is when we say that we push back the fast of the first ones to Friday to Thursday, are we saying that the date for the fast of the first ones has now been airlifted out of the 14th of Nisan, which is Shabbos, and transplanted onto Thursday? Or is the concept more that, no, the date of this fast is still Thursday, sorry, still Shabbos, but we have this concept of tashlumin where we're compensating for that fast by doing it on Thursday. But it's not that in other words, the special segula, the special whatever you want to call it, the special the nature of the day, that today is a fast and it's a special day. Does that remain on Shabbos and we're sort of supplementing it by doing it on Thursday? Or have we transplanted it into Thursday? If you say we've transplanted it to Thursday, so if you forgot to fast, so then it's too bad, you forgot to fast, you missed it. But if you say that it's moved, that really the date is still Shabbos and we're just doing it to Thursday to make up for that, so then you could say that if you forgot to fast on Thursday, okay, there's a fast coming up in Shabbos, you're not going to be able to do it. So you can fast on Friday. True, initially we don't schedule it for Friday because we have a preference not to initially schedule fasts for Friday. But I don't think there's any more in the fridge, but there's a case on the side of it. So initially we don't schedule it on Friday, but that doesn't mean that we can't, if somebody forgot, then you should be able to do it. Now, it doesn't speak about this explicitly in Shulchan Aruch with the case of Tanis B'Cheres, but we do have an explicit mention of this in Shulchan Aruch with regards to Tanis Esther. Again, Purim falls on Sunday. Tanis Esther is pushed back to Thursday. What happened if somebody didn't fast on Thursday? So let's look in the Shulchan Aruch over here on the screen. It says here like this: we fast on the 13th of Adar, but if Purim falls on Sunday, then we fast on Thursday. And the Ramah says that in such a scenario where Purim falls on Sunday, you fast on Thursday, and there was a bris on that day, so then you may participate in the bris, whether it's referring to anyone may participate, or at least the people immediately related, whatever the different approaches to that. But basically, people involved in the bris may partake in the meal of the bris, and then they fast the next day. They fast on Friday. Why does the Taz say that? Why does Ramah say that? Because initially we schedule it for Thursday. Here there was a situation where you couldn't fast on Thursday because it was your son's bris. Fine. So you eat on Thursday, you make a feast for the bris, and then you partake of the Suda on Friday. And then you fast on Friday to make up. Right? So that's explicit with regards to Tanis Esther. And the Rabbi brings here in the footnote just an interesting thing, that this halacha of the Ramah, that the people who make a bris may eat on the Thursday of Tanis Esther and should fast the next day, is not unanimous. Some say that even those who make a bris should fast. But the Rebbe quotes from the Shari Tshuva that even they would agree that if a person forgot to fast on Thursday, you make it on Friday. Okay, so to summarize, what happened? We have a fast that's really supposed to be on Shabbos. We pushed it back to Thursday because we don't initially like scheduling fasts on Friday. But by Tanis Esther, if you forgot, then you have to make it up on Friday. What about Tanis B'Cheres? Is Tanis B'Cheres the same as Tanis Esther, or is Tanis B'Cheres different than Tanis Esther? Now, okay, so here's the question. Look, in practice, and I'm pretty sure I did put this on the source sheet. Just a second. There we go. In practice, okay, let's just read this out of the Alter Rebbe. In a place where there's no prevalent custom to the contrary, the firstborn may partake of a feast associated with the mitzvah and free himself from the obligation of fasting. However, may blessings light upon those who are stringent and refrain from doing so. That's it, right? So in practice, we all know that it's not very common, even though the truth is, even though the Alter Rebbe does say in the continuation of this Sif Ches 8, that the common practice is that people do fast and do not partake in a siyum. Nevertheless, that was true, I guess, in the community that the Alter Rebbe lived in. But nowadays, it's pretty much widespread custom that people don't fast, people partake in a siyum. and that way they get rid of a fast. And the mechanism is that because partaking in a siyum is a mitzvah, so just like we saw the Ramah say that if you have a bris, your son's bris is on Tanis Esther, so you eat for the bris and then you fast the next day. So here also, on Tanis B'chayris, forget about this year, on a regular year, fast of the firstborns, you're fasting. Oh, but now there's a siyum. It's a mitzvah to partake in a siyum. And by that token, it doesn't have to just be a siyum. If there happens to be a bris, a pidin haben, or any other sudas mitzvah that day, I actually personally once attended a pidin haben on Erev Pesach. Yeah, so that was, I'm not a b'chayr, and that was before I had a son who's a b'chayr, who I'm fasting on his behalf. But anyway, so it's a mitzvah to partake in the sunnah. No, so stellt sich the shaila. Hold on, what does the Ramah say? What do you do if you partake in a sunnah's mitzvah? And he talks about a bris on Thursday of Tanis Esther when it's pushed back to Thursday. This year Tanis Esther was on Thursday, but if it's pushed back to Thursday, he says you have to fast again the next day. So if you're if what are we saying? The fast of the firstborns this year is when we're pushing it back to Thursday. What do? You come to shul, you partake in a siyum. So you didn't fast. So on a regular year, you didn't fast, and that's it. The next day is Pesach. It's farafalim, like they say.
That's the difference between,
but this year, sorry?
The difference between kind of Esther and other fasts.
Right, other fasts you push back. Other fasts, Tanis Esther pushes
you have
back.
To make up for kind of Esther.
Yes, after the thing. Here we don't have after Purim. That's true, but here we don't. We don't. Here in a usual year, there's no concept of making up. You fast on Erev Pesach until the siyum. You partake in the siyum, and that's it. But on this year, when we're partaking in the siyum on Thursday, okay, but then the next day is Friday, so we should have to fast on Friday or make another siyum on Friday. But yet. There's much discussion about this in the achronim and the halachic literature, but in practice, that's not what's done. We make a siyum on Thursday, and that's it. We're finished. So it would appear as if that the fast of the firstborns is different than Tanis Esther in the mechanism. When it comes to Tanis Esther, we're saying we're actually pushing it back to Thursday, and that we're not pushing it back to Thursday, that we're saying that the fast remains on Shabbos. We have to supplement it by fasting on Thursday. If you didn't supplement it on Thursday, supplement it on Friday. Whereas the fast of firstborn, we're saying, no, we've actually uprooted it from Shabbos and transplanted it onto Thursday, and that's why that's it. Now the fast is Thursday. You missed Thursday, that's it. It's done, it's finished. And one second.
One question out of
Yeah.
left field.
Yes.
The firstborn, is that the firstborn son or any firstborn?
That's a good question. It's only the firstborn sons,
Okay.
That's a very good question, because why should it only be firstborn sons? With the death of the firstborn, if I recall correctly, I'm fairly certain that this question is discussed in this Mefarshim discussed this question, that why is it only for males? Surely the females were also part of Tanis B'chayris, of the death of the firstborns. I think it's discussed. Well, there's actually, now that you mention, I don't know if this is relevant to anyone around this table. No, it's certainly not, because none of you have children who are below the age of bar mitzvah. But for example, the custom is, we're going to talk about this more soon, but the custom is that if the father fasts on behalf of the child. So for example, my Mendel is a b'chayr, so until he turns 13, I fast on his behalf or go partake in a siyum on his behalf. What happens if I'm a b'chayr as well? So if I'm a b'chayr and they have a son who's a b'chayr, so what it says in Shulchan Aruch is that in that case, I can't fast for my son because I'm fasting for myself. So in that case, the mother has to fast for the son. Now, we know a lot of mothers who would love to fast on Erev Pesach, but in practice, they don't do that. Why? presumably precisely because of that, because it's difficult to expect women who are preparing Yom Tov to fast. But now, if you want to get logical over here, you could say, well, that would be fine if the minhag was to fast. But nowadays, the minhag is to partake in a siyum instead of fasting. So that, in such a case where you have the father is also b'chayr and the son is also b'chayr, so the mother should partake in a siyum. But there are some women who do that, or some husbands. I've actually on the videos I was listening to Rabbi Farkash in the preparation for Pesach. So he said that years ago when he himself is a b'chayr, and years ago when his oldest child was before bar mitzvah, so he would make a siyum on Erev Pesach at home, and he would do it next to his wife, and they partake in the siyum together. So that's certainly. You have Seth coming, but his oldest is a daughter, so that's not relevant. But okay. Just 1 second. I want to see them here.
Video this one.
I'm the oldest. But my father was the youngest.
The Rebbe also points out an interesting thing. You know, we mentioned before that the fast of the firstborn is by definition pushed off from the real date where it belongs, because the fast of the firstborn doesn't belong on the 14th of Nisan; it belongs on the 15th of Nisan. And every year we push it back 1 day. So this year we push it back 3 days. So it's sort of part of the reason why we're saying that it's different. Tanis Esther is supposed to be on the day that it happened, on the 13th of Nisan. Once in a while, the 13th of Nisan falls on Shabbos, so then there's this sort of added mechanism. Okay, we push it back, we supplement it. So if you didn't supplement it on Thursday, you supplement it on Friday. Whereas the fast of the firstborns, which from its conception, it's only there as a it's always sort of not on the day that it belongs. So wherever it is, that's where it belongs. I'm transplanting it to that day. Now, the truth is, the Rabbi, that is an interesting thing. There's a Shabbos Arugas Habaysim. Arugas Habaysim was Moshe, his name was Moshe Grunewald, who was a very prominent Pesach Rav in pre-war Hungary. And he says that actually the notion of making a siyum is not just, like I said before, partake in a suda, that's a mitzvah to partake in, and therefore then you're exempt from the fast. And because if that were the case, then just because you ate, you continue fasting afterwards. What happens on a regular fast? On a Asar B'Tevis, you by mistake wake up and have a coffee. You still have to continue fasting the rest of the day, right? It might not be considered a fast, and it may be questionable whether or not you could say get an aliyah or say the fast insert into Shemona Esrei, but you still are not allowed to eat, right? So what's this idea that you partake in a siyum and that's it, the fast is over? So the Arugas Habaysim suggests that actually the part of the idea of the siyum is that the idea is that we're supposed to commemorate the miracle and show thanksgiving and celebration that we were saved from the firstborns were saved from the plague. So one way to do that is by fasting. Another way to do that is to make a siyum. It's also sort of, and he says that's why it's specifically a siyum. It's not go to a bris, go to a pitin haben. No, specifically we're supposed to make a siyum on that day. So the Rebbe says, if that's the case, so then granted that we can't fast on Shabbos, but why don't we make a siyum on Shabbos? Right?
You can, huh?
What?
No, you can.
You can, but we don't find that there's nothing wrong. You're welcome to make a siyum, but we don't find that there is such a prevalent custom. So all of this goes to further back up the Rebbe's take over here, that actually that the mechanism is that we've transplanted it and we've surgically moved it to the Thursday. Okay, now there's another element of this which touches upon a very broad topic, which I hope to give a little bit of a brief of an overview on. It's a topic which is discussed at great length in many achreinim, and there are numerous places in Likutei Sichos that the Rebbe discusses this in length, and in different places the Rebbe sort of takes different perspectives of this discussion. Just hopefully going to give you a bit of an overview. And that is what happens if a child's bar mitzvah is on the 14th of Nisan this year, right? So then what? What do we do here? One second. Everything okay there?
Close your door.
Oh. If, according to the way we've explained it until now, then it works very well, because basically we're saying the fast has moved over to the Thursday. So on Thursday, the child's not yet bat mitzvah, so the father fasts on his behalf. So that's perfect. The question becomes, what if we do want to engage a little bit in entertaining the other approach? That actually the fast, it's sort of that Thursday is a tashlumin, like it is with Tanis Esther. The Thursday, the same question you could ask with Tanis Esther. Yeah, what happens if a child becomes bar mitzvah on the 13th of Adar, which is the Shabbos? Does he need to fast on the Thursday before? So on the one hand, it's sort of hard written in our minds for halacha that somebody under the age of bar mitzvah is just inherently beyond the scope of halacha. He can't be, yes, there's chinuch, there's education, yeah, but he's not. He can't actually be obligated to fast. So what? So back to Pesach, yeah. If we going to entertain the other perspective that actually fasting on Thursday is only a supplement for Friday, for Shabbos, sorry. So then, how does it work when somebody's bar mitzvah? So his father's fasting for him can't help him because your obligation on the Shabbos, you're already bar mitzvah. At that point, your father can't do things for you anymore, and you can't fast for yourself either because you're not bar mitzvah yet. So, and the Rebbe is not going to tolerate this idea that perhaps, possibly, this boy could lose out on the whole value of having the fast of the firstborns that year.
He's already turned 13, but he hasn't had his bar mitzvah.
No, but the bar mitzvah, there's no such thing as having a bar mitzvah in halacha.
He's no longer celebrating.
Celebrating a bar mitzvah is irrelevant as far as halacha is concerned. As far as halacha is concerned, once he turns 13, he's bar mitzvah. The scenario that we're addressing here is where somebody turns 13 on the 14th of Nisan, which is Shabbos. Mm-hmm. So on the day that it should have been the fast of the firstborns, he'll already have been bar mitzvah and be obligated to fast. But this year we've moved it back to Thursday. On Thursday, he's not yet bar mitzvah, so it's kind of a catch-22. His father can't fast for him because we're fasting here to stop. Again, we have this two perspectives. So it's interesting. You know, we have in the first half of the Sikha, the Rabbi very strongly trying to push the agenda of the first perspective that we actually transplanted it to Thursday. Now we're saying, okay, but hold on, there's also this other perspective. Let's engage in that one for a minute. Right? So if the father fasts for him, it doesn't count because the actual obligation is for Shabbos. By Shabbos, he's going to be bar mitzvah. Right. So what do we do here? So this touches upon the whole thing of the notion of hechsher mitzvah. Hechsher mitzvah essentially means that every mitzvah requires some degree of preparation. Right. So, for example, we have a mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. Right. Now, when does that mitzvah kick in? On the first night of Pesach. We can't eat it before, right? We say in the Haggadah, we're not even allowed to eat matzah on that Pesach, right? So so the first night of Pesach comes, I have to eat matzah. I don't have any matzah, right? So obviously, inherent in the mitzvah to eat matzah on the night of Pesach is to buy matzah before Pesach, or to make matzah, whatever, to see to it that come Pesach you're going to have matzah, right? So that's the notion of hechsher mitzvah. That it's not sort of a designated. There's no mitzvah asher kedushanim mitzvah to go and buy matzah, but it's taken for granted that that's a part of the mitzvah. So, what's the status of hechsher mitzvahs? Do we treat hechsher mitzvah just as a mundane act, or do we treat hechsher mitzvah as actually somewhat having the status of a mitzvah? And we see a number of scenarios, and again, this is the topic, that's this big topic that's discussed in many areas. I'll run through just a few examples, not which are explicitly mentioned here in this sikha, but just a few examples. One example is Hachonas Tarchimila, which is, there is an opinion, we don't pass like this, but there is an opinion in the Mishnah, that it's permissible on Shabbos to do anything to prepare for a bris. So if a baby is born on Shabbos, the bris is the following Shabbos. So if necessary, you can go and carve out a knife and make a knife on Shabbos in order to do the bris. Right now, there's no mitzvah to make a knife. The mitzvah is to do a bris. In order to do a bris, you have to have a knife. That's called machshirin, right? So from the fact that there is an opinion that you could do this on Shabbos, that already shows you, even if you don't paskin like that opinion in practice, because we say whatever you're able to do before Shabbos, do before Shabbos. But that does still show you the value that here we have something that's not inherently a mitzvah, but it's a necessary necessary step toward the mitzvah, and it becomes assumes such an important status that we allow you to desecrate Shabbos to do it.
Carry.
You're not allowed. We don't pass them. We pass them. You're not allowed to carry from this. You have to bring the knife and everything before Shabbos.
There's a lot of, I've seen.
Well, here there's an Erev.
No, but I've seen when there's no Erev, I've seen where they paskin that they can. There wasn't not the babish.
No, there's no. Maybe they have a goy bring the baby, and maybe that would be, but
Maybe
maybe
bring the tools that you need.
the tools. I mean, again, you are going to bring it, but not. So there's no. We don't have to. Okay. Another very interesting one is building of a sukkah, and that is the opinion of the Yerushalmi. Again, we don't pass in this way, but there is the opinion of the Yerushalmi that there's an actual bracha to make on building the sukkah, even though there's no mitzvah in the Torah, thou shalt build a sukkah. The mitzvah is thou shalt dwell in the sukkah, right? But because a necessary step towards eating in the sukkah is building the sukkah, so there's even an opinion that you should make a bracha on it. Now, another scenario is where, so we're starting to see how we have something that's not a mitzvah per se, but yet assumes the status of a mitzvah or a quasi-mitzvah. Another scenario where we see this is a woman mitzvah to have children. So basically, there's a Mishnah which says that it's better for the woman, even though a woman we have the betrothal, where the man betroths his wife, which nowadays is done as part of the wedding ceremony, but originally that was done sometime before the wedding ceremony. So you could, it's the best is to do it yourself, and the man gives the woman the ring or whatever item he's using to betroth her. But in theory, it can be done with an agent, with an emissary to do it on your behalf. Nevertheless, it's a mitzvah to do it yourself. Why? Because mitzvah ba yosem b'shluchai. It's a mitzvah to do it. It's always preferable to do something yourself rather than to have an agent do it for you. We discussed this on Sunday, that when it comes to b'dikas chametz, you shouldn't just make an agent to do it. You should do it yourself. In addition to that, the Chabad custom is that you also appoint your family members as agents to do parts of the house, and like this you have both values, that you've involved more people in the mitzvah and that you've also done it yourself, with the exception of your case where if you're going to be at work, we've discussed that. Okay, but so the Ran asks the question, Mela for the man, for him it's a mitzvah to have children, so that's why we say it's a mitzvah to have children. Oh, so if you do the mitzvah of betrothal, which is part of getting married yourself, then you're doing the mitzvah yourself and not through an agent. That's even better. But what mitzvah does a woman have to get married? So the Ran says, so why is it a mitzvah for a woman to accept the ring herself? Why can't she, for the same price, designate an agent to accept the ring on her behalf? Says the Ran, because even though she doesn't have a mitzvah to have children, but because she's a necessary component for her husband to fulfill his mitzvah of having children, right? So therefore, that her act of accepting tradition becomes a mitzvah, and it's better for her to do it herself. Now, I understand that I've touched her on a lot of topics which could do with more elaboration. What do we mean it's a man's mitzvah and not a woman's mitzvah? And what does it mean? I get it that there's many things that I'm not explaining. I'm specifically not, I'm specifically not going into all the details. I'm just bringing this out to demonstrate that we see over here that the Ran is saying that even though a woman, the Ran has gone another leap. Here the Yerushalmi is saying that it's my mitzvah to sit in the sukkah, and therefore when I build the sukkah, I'm also doing a mitzvah. Here, the Ran is taking it a step further. He's saying it's the husband's mitzvah to have children, and therefore, when the woman does something in connection with the marriage, she is also doing a mitzvah, right? So he's taking this hechsher mitzvah idea a step further. Another source where you see how it goes a step further than the person itself is a source from the Sefer Haredim, where he talks about that those who are that when it's the mitzvah, the mitzvah for a kohen to give the priestly blessing. Says the Haredim that when I, as a non-kohen, stand face to face to the kohen and listen to receive their blessing, I'm also part of the mitzvah. Why? Because they need to have people to bless. So, right? Okay. So this then leads kind of into another segment where we all know that the mitzvah of chinuch, that for a child under bar mitzvah to do a mitzvah, he's not really obligated to do the mitzvah. There's the concept of chinuch where it's the father's responsibility to educate him in doing so. But the Rebbe makes the very bold suggestion, and again, it's not even explicitly in the Sikh, I don't think, but it's explicit in a number of different places, and the Rebbe again takes different perspectives and different occasions. But one perspective is, what does the Torah expect from the child? That he should turn 13 and suddenly start doing all the mitzvahs? So no. So just like the Torah expects me to purchase matzah before Pesach, or to bake matzah before Pesach, the Torah expects the child, when he's 11 and 12, whatever it is, to start preparing himself so that when it comes 13, he should know what to do, right? It's not necessarily the same as chinuch, the way we know it, where from a very young age, and we make sure they do the mitzvahs properly. The details could be different, but the notion that a child, right, and there's some discussion in the Sikhs about whether this could extend to a potential convert as well. That does a potential convert have the responsibility, because usually a non-Jew is not allowed to learn Torah. Well, it's a whole discussion. We've discussed this in the past in the Sunday morning class about whether or not a potential convert is allowed to study Torah. So the way it's done commonly nowadays is that they study Torah and they live in the frum community for a number of years before they convert. That wasn't the day it was done. That's not the way it was done once upon a time. But that also essentially is the same question. What does the Torah expect of a convert? He snips and dips, he goes to the mikveh, and then that's it. He suddenly knows how to do everything. Obviously, that takes an acclimation time to learn it and to practice implementing it. And right, everybody knows when you're 12 and you start putting on. That's why we put on tefillin 2 months before the bar mitzvah, because it takes you a little while to start getting it right. So if we are to take this notion of hechsher mitzvah, where we're saying that even another party, the woman, another person, the non-Kohen listening to the Birchas Kohenim, because he's facilitating the mitzvah, that becomes mitzvah status. So what the Rebbe is saying in this sikha, and this is a tremendous chiddush, is that even though, again, we're talking about this child who's going to become bar mitzvah on the 14th, and today is the 30th, it's Thursday, it's the 12th, right? Even though now he's a child, and the normative approach is that a child is completely beyond the scope of halacha, of any obligation. Nevertheless, we could extend this sort of hechsher mitzvah type of mentality and say that because come Thursday, because come Shabbos, you will be bar mitzvah and have an obligation to fast. Therefore, when you fast or partake in a siyum on the Thursday before the Shabbos, even though you're 12 and now really whatever you do is insignificant, nevertheless, this hechsher mitzvah mechanism allows me to apply some sort of significance to the acts of the child and say that his fast is meaningful enough to count, so that it's not so we're not going to say, oh, you're losing out on the benefit of Talis Becheres this year. No, he can also get the benefit. And parenthetically, just one more point. Parenthetically, a kind of similar thing, although it's not exactly similar, but a kind of similar thing is when a child becomes bar mitzvah in the middle of the sphere. Now we know, and in order to make a bracha on sphere Soimer, you have to count every day. If you miss the day, you can't count the sphere, you can't continue with the bracha. So what happens if somebody becomes bar mitzvah in the middle of the sphere? So the halacha is that if he counted every night from the beginning until night 23, when he becomes bar mitzvah, he can continue counting with the bracha. Whatever I did until I was 13, should be completely insignificant to later. So there again, we see, at least the similar, I won't say it's the same because there are differences in intricacies, but at least conceptually, it's a similar concept where we find the actions of a minor being significant, even, once he's post bar mitzvah, and the same is true for the fast of the firstborns. Yes.
The fast of Esther,
Yes.
you can fast another time for it, right? But you have to make up for fast of Esther.
Yes.
One of those things. So what happens in that case if Purim falls on Sunday and his bar mitzvah is on Shabbos? Does he, and everybody fasts on the Thursday, he wasn't bar mitzvah, but you can make up with it somewhere else?
So exactly, but very good point. But based on the logic of the Rebbe is presenting in this sikha, that would not be necessary, because if he fasts on the Thursday before,
he doesn't have obligation.
okay. The question which you have would be, what if he didn't fast on the Thursday before?
Right.
That's an interesting question. If Tanis Esther, which we're saying Tanis Esther is only the Thursday is supplementing, it's not transplanted to Thursday, so it really belongs on Shabbos, and he didn't fast on Thursday, so he can't fast on Shabbos. Does he have to make it up after Purim? That's a good question. I don't know. Shkoyach.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand. I think I can understand a practical reason, or I could come up with a practical reason or two. But why is it that we go out of our way to attend a siyum? To avoid or to break the fast of the firstborn.
As opposed to what? As opposed to fasting?
Well, yeah, as opposed to fasting. Is it because you don't want to fast and be like wiped out, before the Seder? Or?
It's a leniency, that it's an allowance that we have. The Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch that if possible you shouldn't do it, and that the Alter Rebbe testifies that the prevalent custom was not to do it. But I don't know exactly the history of how this evolved, but in practice nowadays there are few people who actually fast, and most people rely on the heter of attending a siyum. And even last year, where most of us did not have the opportunity to attend the siyum in person, the rabbis didn't say, okay, just fast. They said they allowed us to rely on hearing a siyum over the phone and Zoom and all that type of stuff, even though there was also the medical concern that that was at the very beginning of COVID, where nobody knew what was going on, and we were like, I don't know, maybe if we fast, that will weaken our immune system and put us at risk. So that was also a consideration. But it is a big leniency it's an allowance that we say that we don't need to fast. You could discharge your obligation by partaking in a siyum, and that allowance leniency has become the widespread prevalent custom.
So that would tell me that in some way spiritually, the fast of the firstborn before Pesach is of somehow less importance than these other fasts, because we can apply this leniency.
So it would seem, yes. The reason is because the fast of the firstborns is a custom, whereas the other fasts are Divrei Kabbalah. They're in scripture. They're not biblical, but they're mentioned in the holy books.
But we have other fasts, right? Fast of Gedalia, other fasts
Fast of Gedalia is mentioned. The 6 fasts, yeah. So there's Yom Kippur, which obviously is much more thing. Then you have the fast of Gedalia, the fast of the 10th of Tevis, the 17th of Tammuz, and the 9th of Av, which are all mentioned explicitly in the Psukim, in Scripture. Tzem Revi, Tzem Chamishi, Tzem Asiri, Tzem Ashvi. I think Tzem Gedalia. I think Tzem Gedalia is mentioned explicitly. Now, Tzem Gedalia also has leniencies for other reasons. Tzem Gedalia has leniencies, first of all, because it's a week before Yom Kippur, and we want to make sure that nobody's going to overextend themselves then and be at risk not being able to fast in Yom Kippur. And the other reason why we have leniency for Tzem Gedalia is because it's a double whammy pushed off. Really, it should have been on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, but because we can't fast then, we push it off another 2 days. So it's already pushed off and pushed off again, and in some years it's pushed off even and a third time when it falls on Shabbos. So so that's why there's leniencies for that. And so at Tanis Esther is sort of a different ballgame. Which
Okay, thank you.
okay, any other questions? Nice to see you, Emmanuel.
This is Tiv, no?